Marcus Rivera had always believed that heroes existed only in movies, not in the muddy construction sites where he spent 14-hour days trying to earn enough money to keep his daughter fed. But on that rain-soaked Tuesday morning in September, as he watched the normally peaceful Clearwater Creek transform into a raging torrent that swept away everything in its path, Marcus discovered that sometimes ordinary people are called to do extraordinary things, even when they have no idea that a single act of courage will change their lives forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock beside Marcus Rivera's mattress had been broken for 3 months. But his body had learned to wake at 5:30 every morning without mechanical assistance. The small apartment in Cedar Falls felt even smaller in the pre-dawn darkness, with clothes hanging from doorknobs and textbooks scattered across the kitchen table where his 12-year-old daughter Sofia completed her homework each night by lamplight. Marcus rolled out of bed quietly, careful not to disturb Sofia's sleep in the next room. She needed every minute of rest she could get before facing another day at Riverside Middle School, where her secondhand uniforms and packed lunches of peanut butter sandwiches marked her as different from classmates whose parents could afford field trips and new sneakers. The coffee maker had died 2 weeks ago, another casualty in the ongoing war between Marcus's paycheck and the basic necessities of life. He heated water in a saucepan and poured it over instant coffee grounds, creating a bitter brew that tasted like disappointment, but contained enough caffeine to fuel another day of manual labor. Through the kitchen window, Marcus could see the first hints of sunrise, painting the hills surrounding Cedar Falls. The town had once been prosperous, back when the furniture factory employed half the population, and Main Street bustled with shoppers. Now it was the kind of place where young people left as soon as they graduated high school, seeking opportunities in cities that still believed in economic growth. Marcus had been one of those young people once. He'd left Cedar Falls at 18 with a football scholarship to State University and dreams of becoming an engineer. For 4 years, it had seemed like his plan was working. Good grades, summer internships, a girlfriend named Carmen who shared his vision of a successful future in some distant city where people like them could build the kind of life they'd only seen in magazines. Then Carmen had gotten pregnant during their senior year, and everything had changed. Not because they didn't want Sofia, they'd both fallen in love with her before she was even born, but because the engineering job market had collapsed just as Marcus was graduating, and the only work he could find was temporary construction projects that paid enough to survive, but not enough to thrive. Carmen had tried to make it work for 3 years, but eventually the stress of poverty and Marcus's increasingly long absences for work had torn their small family apart. She'd moved to Phoenix with a man who could offer her stability, leaving Marcus with full custody of Sofia and the crushing responsibility of being both father and provider in a town where neither role paid particularly well. The construction site was a 40-minute drive from Cedar Falls, through winding mountain roads that became treacherous in bad weather. Marcus worked for Hendricks Construction, a company that specialized in highway improvement projects and paid its workers in cash at the end of each week. It wasn't steady employment, it wasn't benefits-eligible work, and it certainly wasn't the career he'd imagined when he was studying calculus and physics in college. But it was honest labor that allowed him to look his daughter in the eye at dinner each night. Ray Hendricks was a decent man who'd built his business by treating workers fairly and completing projects on schedule. He'd hired Marcus 3 months ago when the State Highway Department had contracted Hendricks Construction to repair a section of Route 47 that had been damaged by spring flooding. The work was hard, physical labor that left Marcus's back aching and his hands raw. But Ray paid better than most employers in the region and didn't ask too many questions about immigration status or previous work history. This morning's assignment was bridge repair on a section of Route 47 that crossed Clearwater Creek about 15 miles outside town. The creek was normally a gentle stream that meandered through pastoral farmland, but recent heavy rains had swollen it into something resembling a real river. Not dangerous yet, but substantial enough that state engineers wanted the bridge inspected before winter weather made the situation worse. Marcus arrived at the work site to find Ray Hendricks standing beside his pickup truck, studying weather reports on his phone with the concerned expression of someone who'd learned to take Mother Nature seriously. The sky was overcast, pregnant with the kind of clouds that promised serious precipitation before the day was finished. "Morning, Marcus." Ray called out as Marcus gathered his tools from the back of his beaten Ford pickup. "We're going to try to get the bridge inspection finished before this weather hits. State meteorologist is calling for possible flash flooding in low-lying areas." Marcus looked at Clearwater Creek, which was already running higher and faster than he'd ever seen it. "You think we should postpone until the weather clears?" Ray shook his head with the resignation of a man whose business depended on completing projects regardless of atmospheric conditions. "Contract says we finish this inspection by Friday, or we forfeit the penalty clause. With the amount of money we've got tied up in this job, I can't afford to miss the deadline." The inspection work required Marcus to rappel beneath the bridge, to examine the concrete supports for signs of erosion or structural damage. It was the kind of job that demanded absolute focus and physical coordination, especially with the creek running higher than normal beneath his feet. One mistake, one moment of inattention, and he could find himself swept away by current that was already strong enough to move large rocks and fallen trees. As Marcus prepared his safety equipment, he thought about Sofia getting ready for school in their small apartment. She was old enough to handle the morning routine by herself, but he still worried about leaving her alone, especially on days when his work took him to remote locations where cell phone coverage was unreliable. Sofia Rivera was 12 years old, but she possessed the practical wisdom of someone who'd been forced to grow up faster than most children. She understood that her father worked dangerous jobs because safe jobs didn't pay enough money to cover rent and groceries. She knew that their apartment was smaller and shabbier than those of her classmates, because that was what they could afford on a construction worker's salary. She'd learned not to ask for things like new clothes or school supplies, because she could see the stress in her father's eyes whenever money became the topic of conversation. But Sofia was also brilliant, the kind of student who absorbed information effortlessly and asked questions that impressed her teachers. She'd inherited her father's analytical mind and her mother's artistic sensibility, creating a combination that made her equally comfortable with advanced mathematics and creative writing. Her grades were excellent, despite the challenges of completing homework in an apartment where the internet was frequently disconnected and the heating system worked sporadically. Mrs. Patterson, Sofia's sixth-grade teacher, had pulled Marcus aside after parent conferences to discuss Sofia's academic potential. "Your daughter is gifted, Mr. Rivera," she'd said, with the earnest intensity of an educator who'd spent decades identifying exceptional students. "With the right opportunities, she could earn—" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Scholarships to excellent high schools and universities, but she's going to need support, tutoring, extracurricular activities that help her develop her talents. Marcus had listened politely, but privately he'd wondered how he was supposed to provide those opportunities when he could barely afford to keep Sofia fed and clothed. Tutoring cost money they didn't have. Extracurricular activities required transportation and equipment purchases that stretched their budget beyond the breaking point. Sometimes being a good parent meant acknowledging the limitations of what you could provide, no matter how much you wanted to give your child every possible advantage. As Marcus began his descent beneath the bridge, he could hear the sound of rushing water growing louder with each foot of rope he released. Clearwater Creek had transformed from a gentle stream into something that demanded respect and caution. The current was strong enough to carry substantial debris, including tree branches and chunks of concrete that had been washed loose from somewhere upstream. The bridge supports looked solid, but Marcus noticed signs of erosion around the foundation that concerned him. The recent flooding had scoured away soil and exposed concrete that should have remained buried, creating potential weak points that could become dangerous if the weather continued to deteriorate. He took photographs with his phone, documenting the damage so Ray could include it in the report to state highway officials. Above him, the sky was growing darker, and Marcus could feel the first drops of rain beginning to fall. He worked quickly, completing his inspection with the efficiency of someone who understood that weather conditions could change rapidly in mountain terrain. Flash floods were a real danger in this area, especially during seasons when prolonged rain combined with snowmelt from higher elevations to create massive volumes of runoff water. Just as Marcus was preparing to climb back up to the bridge deck, he heard something that made his blood freeze in his veins. A human voice calling for help from somewhere downstream. A woman's voice, strained with panic and desperation, barely audible above the sound of rushing water. Marcus peered through the bridge supports, trying to locate the source of the voice. About 200 yards downstream, he could see a figure in the water, someone who was clearly struggling against a current that was far too strong for any swimmer to overcome. The woman appeared to be caught on a partially submerged fallen tree, but even from this distance Marcus could see that her grip was failing and that the tree itself was unstable in the rushing water. Without thinking about his own safety or the complications that might arise from abandoning his work assignment, Marcus began climbing back up to the bridge deck with desperate speed. Ray Hendricks was nowhere to be seen, probably inspecting another section of the bridge, which meant Marcus was on his own to deal with an emergency that was unfolding in real time. Marcus reached his pickup truck and grabbed the emergency kit he always carried, a collection of rope, flotation devices, and first aid supplies that he'd assembled after years of working on projects near water. He also grabbed a cell phone, though he knew that coverage in this area was unreliable at best. The woman's voice was weaker now, more desperate, and Marcus realized that he had only minutes to act before the situation became irreversible. He ran along the creek bank, fighting through dense vegetation and uneven terrain, trying to reach a position where he could attempt a rescue without becoming a victim himself. As he got closer, Marcus could see that the woman was well dressed, wearing what appeared to be an expensive business suit that was now soaked and torn from her struggle with the water and debris. She looked to be in her 40s, with dark hair that clung to her face and eyes that reflected both intelligence and terror as she fought to maintain her grip on the fallen tree. "Hold on!" Marcus shouted, though he doubted. She could hear him above the sound of rushing water. "I'm going to get you out of there!" The rescue attempt required split-second decision-making and physical courage that Marcus didn't know he possessed. The current was too strong for him to simply wade into the water, and the banks were too steep and unstable for a conventional rope rescue. Instead, he would have to enter the water upstream from the woman's position and allow the current to carry him to her location, timing his approach so that he could grab her without being swept past her position. Marcus tied one end of his rope to a sturdy tree on the bank, creating a safety line that would hopefully prevent both of them from being carried further downstream if his rescue attempt failed. Then he waded into Clearwater Creek, feeling the shocking cold of the water and the immediate power of a current that threatened to knock him off his feet. The next few minutes passed in a blur of adrenaline and instinct. Marcus allowed the current to carry him toward the fallen tree, while fighting to maintain control of his position in the water. The woman saw him coming and reached out with one hand, still clinging to the tree with the other, her face showing a mixture of hope and disbelief that someone had actually come to help her. Their hands connected just as the fallen tree shifted in the current, threatening to roll over and trap both of them beneath its massive trunk. Marcus grabbed the woman around the waist and pulled her away from the tree, using his rope as a guide to work their way back toward the bank against the powerful current. The woman was conscious but exhausted, barely able to help with her own rescue as Marcus fought to drag both of them to safety. She was heavier than her slender frame suggested, and Marcus realized that her business suit was probably waterlogged and that she might be injured in ways that weren't immediately visible. By the time they reached the muddy bank of Clearwater Creek, both of them were breathing heavily and shaking from a combination of cold and adrenaline. The woman collapsed onto the grass, coughing up creek water and trying to regain her composure, while Marcus checked her for obvious injuries that might require immediate medical attention. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked, kneeling beside her and trying to assess her condition. "Can you tell me what happened? How did you end up in the water?" The woman looked up at him with eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his appearance, from his mud-stained work clothes to the calluses on his hands. When she spoke, her voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being in charge of complex situations. "My car went off the road upstream," she said, gesturing vaguely toward a bend in the creek where Marcus could now see twisted metal protruding from the water. "I tried to get out before it was completely submerged, but the current was stronger than I expected." Marcus looked toward the wreckage, understanding that the woman had been incredibly lucky to survive what appeared to be a serious accident. The car was a luxury sedan, probably worth more than Marcus made in 2 years, now twisted around a concrete culvert like an expensive piece of modern art. "We need to get you to a hospital," Marcus said, helping the woman sit up. "You might have internal injuries or hypothermia, and we need to call the police about your accident." The woman shook her head with surprising vigor for someone who'd just been pulled from a flooding creek. "No hospitals, no police reports. Not yet." She studied Marcus's face with the intensity of someone making an important decision. "What's your name?" "Marcus Rivera. I work construction for Hendricks Company. We were inspecting the bridge when I heard you calling for help." "Marcus Rivera," she repeated, as if testing how the name sounded. "You saved my life, Marcus. That makes you either very brave or very foolish." Marcus helped her to her feet, noting that she seemed steadier than he'd expected given her recent ordeal. "Maybe both. But I couldn't just leave you in the water. Anyone would have done the same thing." The woman's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You'd be surprised how few people would risk their own safety to help a stranger, especially a stranger who might bring complications into their life." Before Marcus could ask what she meant by complications, Ray Hendricks appeared through the trees, probably drawn by the sound of voices and concerned about Marcus's absence from the bridge inspection. Ray took in the scene quickly, his experienced eyes noting the woman's expensive but ruined clothing, the evidence of a rescue, and the tension in the air that suggested this situation was more complex than it appeared. "Everything all right here, Marcus?" Ray asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer was no. "Car accident," Marcus explained briefly. "The lady was trapped in the creek. I got her out, but we should probably call emergency services." The woman stepped forward, extending her hand to Ray with the confident gesture of someone accustomed to taking control of conversations. "I'm Catherine Wells, and before anyone makes any phone calls, I'd like to speak with Mr. Rivera privately." Ray looked between Marcus and Catherine Wells, clearly sensing undercurrents he didn't understand. "Marcus, we've got a bridge inspection to finish. The state inspector is expecting our report by tomorrow morning." Catherine Wells reached into her waterlogged purse and produced a business card that had somehow survived her ordeal in the creek. She handed it to Ray, who examined it with growing confusion and concern. "Atlantic Aqua Industries," Ray read aloud. "Catherine Wells, Chief Executive Officer." He looked up at Catherine with new understanding and considerable wariness. "You're the CEO of Atlantic Aqua?" Catherine nodded, studying Ray's reaction with the same analytical intensity she'd directed toward Marcus. "I am. And Mr. Rivera has just saved the life of someone who can make significant changes to the economic future of this entire region." Marcus looked between Ray and Catherine, sensing that he'd missed something important. "What's Atlantic Aqua Industries?" Ray's expression was grim as he answered. "Only the largest water management company in North America. They control municipal water systems, irrigation networks, and flood control projects across 43 states." He paused, studying Catherine with obvious suspicion. "They also have a reputation for acquiring water rights and then charging local communities premium prices for services they use to provide themselves." Catherine's smile was cool and professional. "We prefer to think of it as bringing efficiency and expertise to water management systems that have been neglected by local authorities. But Mr. Rivera's heroic actions this morning have given me an opportunity to demonstrate that Atlantic Aqua can also be a positive force for community development." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with his recent immersion in Clearwater Creek. What kind of community development? "The kind that could transform Cedar Falls from a dying factory town into a model of sustainable economic growth," Catherine said. "Mr. Rivera, you've given me something very valuable today. My life. I'd like to return the favor by giving you something equally valuable. Opportunity." Ray stepped closer to Marcus, his voice low and urgent. "Marcus, be very careful here. Companies like Atlantic Aqua don't offer opportunities out of gratitude. They offer contracts that sound too good to be true because they usually are." Catherine heard Ray's warning and addressed it directly. "Mr. Hendricks, I understand your skepticism. Atlantic Aqua has acquired properties and water rights throughout this region over the past 5 years. Some of those acquisitions have been controversial, but our intentions have always been to modernize infrastructure and create sustainable economic development." Marcus felt like he was standing in the middle of a conversation that involved forces far beyond his understanding. "I don't know anything about water rights or corporate development. I just pulled you out of the creek because it was the right thing to do." "Exactly," Catherine said, her voice warming with what seemed like genuine appreciation. "You acted without calculation, without considering what you might gain or lose. That kind of character is rare in my world, Mr. Rivera. It's also incredibly valuable." Ray grabbed Marcus's arm with urgent intensity. "Marcus, whatever she's offering, think very carefully before you agree to anything. Companies like Atlantic Aqua don't give gifts. They make investments that they expect to pay dividends for decades." Catherine's expression hardened slightly as she addressed Ray's concerns. "Mr. Hendricks, your construction company has been working on state highway projects in this region for 15 years. How much of that work involved repairing infrastructure damage caused by flooding?" Ray's silence was answer enough, and Catherine continued with the confidence of someone who'd done her research thoroughly. 63% of your revenue over the past decade has come from flood damage repair contracts. Roads washed out by Clearwater Creek, bridges damaged by seasonal flooding, culverts destroyed by what meteorologists call 100-year storms that now seem to occur every 3 or 4 years. Marcus looked at Ray, seeing confirmation of Catherine's claims in his employer's expression. "Is that true?" "Climate change has made weather patterns more extreme," Ray admitted reluctantly. "We've been repairing the same sections of road repeatedly because the current drainage systems can't handle the increased volume of runoff water." Catherine nodded with satisfaction. "Exactly the problem that Atlantic Aqua specializes in solving. Modern flood control systems, improved drainage infrastructure, sustainable water management that protects communities while creating long-term economic opportunities." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the complexity of what he was hearing. "What does any of this have to do with me? I'm just a construction worker who happened to be in the right place when you needed help." Catherine's smile was enigmatic as she reached into her purse and produced a phone that had somehow survived her ordeal in the creek. "Mr. Rivera, I'm going to make you an offer that will change your life and the life of your daughter Sofia. But first, I need to make some phone calls to arrange transportation and dry clothes. Would you be willing to meet me this evening to discuss a business proposition?" Marcus stared at Catherine, wondering how she knew about Sofia and feeling a growing sense that he'd stumbled into something far more complicated than a simple rescue mission. "How do you know about my daughter?" "Atlantic Aqua conducts thorough research on all local contractors and their employees," Catherine said matter-of-factly. "We believe in understanding the communities where we operate. Sofia Rivera, age 12, honor roll student at Riverside Middle School, lives with her father in a 2-bedroom apartment on Elm Street. Exceptional academic potential but limited educational opportunities due to financial constraints." Ray stepped protectively closer to Marcus. "That sounds an awful lot like surveillance, Ms. Wells." Catherine's laugh was warm but calculating. "Mr. Hendricks, it's called due diligence. When you're planning to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in regional infrastructure development, you learn everything you can about the people who might be affected by your projects." Marcus felt a mixture of anger and unease at the casual revelation that his family had been studied without their knowledge or consent. "You've been investigating me and my daughter?" "I've been investigating everyone in Cedar Falls and the surrounding communities," Catherine corrected. "Atlantic Aqua doesn't make investments blindly. We research local economic conditions, employment patterns, family structures, educational systems, and community leadership before we commit resources to regional development projects." She paused, studying Marcus's expression with analytical intensity. "What I found when I researched your family was exactly the kind of story that makes regional development worthwhile. An intelligent, hard-working single father, trying to provide opportunities for a gifted daughter in a community that lacks the resources to nurture exceptional talent. That's the human element that makes our work meaningful." Ray's expression was skeptical. "And I suppose Atlantic Aqua has a solution for that human element?" Catherine nodded confidently. "We do. Mr. Rivera, I'd like to offer you a position as a community liaison for Atlantic Aqua's Cedar Falls development project. The salary would be substantial enough that you could afford to provide Sofia with the educational opportunities she deserves. Private tutoring, extracurricular activities, preparation for academic scholarships that could fund her university education." Marcus felt his heart racing as he processed what Catherine was offering. Financial security for his family, educational opportunities for Sofia, the chance to escape the constant stress of living paycheck to paycheck. It sounded too good to be true, which probably meant it was. "What would I have to do as a community liaison?" Marcus asked carefully. Catherine's smile was reassuring, but somehow didn't reach her eyes. Help Atlantic Aqua understand local concerns and perspectives as we develop our infrastructure projects. Serve as a bridge between our corporate team and the Cedar Falls community. Ensure that our development plans serve the interests of local residents as well as our shareholders. Ray's voice was sharp with suspicion. And what exactly are these infrastructure projects? What is Atlantic Aqua planning to build in Cedar Falls? Catherine gestured toward Clearwater Creek, which continued to rush past them with dangerous intensity. Comprehensive flood control systems that will protect this community from the kind of extreme weather events that are becoming increasingly common. Modern water treatment facilities that will provide clean, affordable water for decades to come. Economic development opportunities that will bring jobs and prosperity to a region that has been economically stagnant for too long. Marcus looked at the flooded creek, thinking about the bridge inspection he'd been conducting when he'd heard Catherine's cries for help. The infrastructure in this region was indeed inadequate, constantly requiring expensive repairs that consumed resources without providing long-term solutions. "How much time do I have to think about this?" Marcus asked. Catherine checked her waterlogged watch with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to managing multiple priorities simultaneously. "Mr. Rivera, I understand that this is a significant decision that will affect your family's future. Take the time you need to consider the opportunity carefully." She handed Marcus another business card, this one from a waterproof case that had protected it from her ordeal in the creek. "My personal contact information. Call me this evening when you've had a chance to think about what I'm offering, but don't take too long to decide. Opportunities like this don't remain available indefinitely." As Catherine spoke, Marcus heard the sound of vehicles approaching through the trees. 2 black SUVs emerged from the forest, moving with the precision of a well-coordinated operation. Atlantic Aqua's emergency response team had apparently been tracking their CEO's location and had arrived to extract her from what they probably viewed as a compromising situation. "My ride," Catherine explained as professionally dressed men emerged from the SUVs and approached their location with the efficiency of people accustomed to managing executive emergencies. "Mr. Rivera, thank you again for saving my life. I hope you'll give serious consideration to joining our team." Marcus watched as Catherine was whisked away by her corporate handlers, leaving him standing beside Clearwater Creek with Ray Hendricks, and a growing sense that his life had just become infinitely more complicated. The business card in his hand felt heavier than its physical weight, representing choices and consequences that he wasn't sure he was prepared to navigate. "Marcus," Ray said quietly, "whatever you decide about this woman's offer, remember that companies like Atlantic Aqua don't operate on gratitude or charity. They operate on profit margins and strategic advantages. If she's offering you this job, it's because she believes your participation will benefit her company in ways that are worth far more than whatever salary she's planning to pay you." Marcus nodded, understanding Ray's concerns but also thinking about Sofia and the educational opportunities that adequate financial resources could provide. "I know. But Ray, what if this is our chance? What if this is the break that could change everything for Sofia and me?" Ray's expression was sympathetic, but worried. "Maybe it is, Marcus. But make sure you understand the price before you agree to pay it. Companies like Atlantic Aqua don't give away anything for free. They invest in people and communities because they expect to get something back that's worth far more than their initial investment." As they walked back toward the bridge to complete their interrupted inspection, Marcus found himself thinking about Catherine Wells and the strange circumstances that had brought them together. He'd saved her life without knowing who she was or what she represented. Now he was being offered an opportunity that could transform his family's future, but only if he was willing to trust a woman whose company had a reputation for prioritizing profit over community welfare. The bridge inspection took another 2 hours to complete, but Marcus found it difficult to concentrate on technical details when his mind was racing with questions about Catherine's offer. By the time they finished documenting the bridge's condition and uploaded their report to the State Highway Department, the rain had intensified into a steady downpour that turned Clearwater Creek into an even more formidable torrent. During the drive back to Cedar Falls, Marcus called Sofia's school to check on her status and was relieved to learn that all students were being kept inside due to the severe weather warning that had been issued for the region. His daughter was safe, at least for the moment, But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that her safety might depend on decisions he was about to make regarding Catherine Wells and Atlantic Aqua Industries. Sofia was waiting for him when he arrived home that evening, her homework spread across the kitchen table alongside a dinner of microwave soup and packaged crackers. She looked up as Marcus entered the apartment, immediately noticing his thoughtful expression and the tension in his posture. "Dad, you look worried. Did something happen at work?" Marcus sat down across from his daughter, studying her intelligent eyes and wondering how to explain a situation that he didn't fully understand himself. "Something unusual happened today, Sofia. I helped someone who might be able to help our family in return, but I'm not sure if accepting her help would be the right thing to do." Sofia set down her pencil with the serious attention she gave to all discussions involving their family's future. "What kind of help?" Marcus pulled Catherine's business card from his pocket and placed it on the table beside Sofia's algebra homework. "A job offer? Better pay, steady work, enough money that we could afford some of the things you've been wanting. Tutoring, extracurricular activities, maybe even saving money for college." Sofia picked up the business card, reading it with the analytical skills that made her an exceptional student. "Atlantic Aqua Industries. I've read about them in current events class. They're a water management company that's been buying up water rights all over the country." Marcus looked at his daughter with renewed appreciation for her intelligence and awareness. "What else do you know about them?" Sofia's expression grew thoughtful as she accessed her memory of classroom discussions and independent research. "Their business model involves acquiring municipal water systems and then raising prices to increase profitability. Some communities have experienced significant rate increases after Atlantic Aqua takes over their water services." Marcus felt a surge of pride in his daughter's analytical abilities, followed immediately by concern about the implications of what she was telling him. "So you think accepting a job with Atlantic Aqua would be a bad idea?" Sofia studied her father's face with the perceptive wisdom that had developed from years of observing adult conversations and understanding the economic pressures that shaped their family's decisions. "I think you should be very careful about any company that offers opportunities that seem too good to be true. But I also think you should consider what's best for our family, even if it means working for a company whose values might not perfectly align with your own." Marcus was struck by the mature perspective his 12-year-old daughter brought to a situation that had left him feeling confused and uncertain. "What do you mean?" Sofia organized her thoughts with the methodical approach she applied to academic problems. "Dad, you've been working construction jobs that barely pay enough to cover our basic expenses. You're constantly worried about money, about providing for me, about my future educational opportunities. If this company is offering you a job that could solve those problems, maybe the ethical considerations are less important than the practical benefits." Marcus stared at his daughter, realizing that she'd inherited not only his analytical intelligence, but also a pragmatic wisdom that he sometimes lacked. "You think I should take the job?" Sofia's smile was gentle but determined. "I think you should learn more about what they're offering before you make any decisions. But Dad, you spent years sacrificing your own comfort and security to provide for me. If this opportunity could give us both a better future, then maybe it's worth exploring, even if Atlantic Aqua isn't the most ethical company in the world." Marcus pulled Sofia into a hug, feeling grateful for her presence in his life and amazed by the young woman she was becoming. "When did you get so wise?" "Probably around the time I realized that our family's financial situation required me to think like an adult instead of a kid," Sofia said with the matter-of-fact honesty that characterized her approach to difficult topics. That evening, after Sofia had finished her homework and gone to bed, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with Catherine Wells's business card and his cell phone, trying to decide whether to make a call that might change everything about their lives. The rain continued to pound against the windows of their small apartment, and Marcus could hear sirens in the distance, probably emergency responders dealing with flooding in low-lying areas of Cedar Falls. He thought about the morning's rescue, the split-second decision to risk his own safety to save a stranger's life. At the time, it had seemed like the obvious thing to do, a moral imperative that required no analysis or calculation. Now he was facing a different kind of decision, one that involved his family's future and potential compromises with his personal values. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed Catherine Wells's number, listening to it ring while he tried to organize his thoughts for a conversation that could determine the trajectory of his and Sofia's lives. When Catherine answered, her voice was crisp and professional, despite the late hour and her recent traumatic experience. "Mr. Rivera, I was hoping you would call. Have you had time to consider my offer?" "I've been thinking about it," Marcus said carefully, "but I have some questions about what Atlantic Aqua is planning for Cedar Falls, and what my role would be in those plans." Catherine's tone became more focused, the voice of a corporate executive transitioning into negotiation mode. "I'd be happy to answer your questions, Mr. Rivera, but I think this conversation would be more productive if we met in person. Are you available tomorrow evening?" Marcus thought about his work schedule and Ray Hendricks's concerns about Atlantic Aqua's business practices. "Where would you want to meet?" "There's a conference room at the Riverside Hotel downtown. Private, comfortable, conducive to the kind of detailed discussion we need to have about your future with Atlantic Aqua." Marcus agreed to the meeting, though he felt a growing sense that he was committing to something far more complex than a simple job interview. After hanging up, he sat in the darkness of his apartment, listening to the storm outside and wondering whether he was about to make the best decision of his life or the biggest mistake. The next morning brought clear skies and the kind of crisp autumn air that made the mountains surrounding Cedar Falls look like a postcard advertisement for rural tranquility. But the illusion of peace was broken by the evidence of the previous night's flooding, visible in the debris scattered across Main Street, and the emergency vehicles still working to clear storm drains and assess infrastructure damage. Marcus drove to the construction site through neighborhoods, where families were cleaning mud and debris from their yards, reminded once again of the region's vulnerability to extreme weather events. Clearwater Creek had receded to more normal levels, but the damage from its brief rampage was evident in the twisted metal and scattered debris that lined its banks. Ray Hendricks was waiting at the bridge site with a grim expression and a folder full of photographs documenting the previous day's flooding. "Marcus, the State Highway Department wants us to expand our inspection to include flood damage assessment. Looks like this storm was worse than anyone anticipated." Marcus spent the morning photographing and documenting flood damage, work that felt different now that he understood Atlantic Aqua's interest in regional infrastructure development. Every washed-out culvert and damaged bridge support represented the kind of problem that Catherine Wells's company claimed to solve, but also represented potential profit opportunities that might not align with community interests. During lunch break, Marcus called Elena Martinez, the principal at Sofia's school, and one of the few people in Cedar Falls whose judgment he trusted completely. Elena had been fighting for years to improve educational opportunities for local students, often using her own resources to fund programs that the school district couldn't afford. "Marcus, I heard there was some excitement out at the bridge yesterday," Elena said when she answered her phone. "Ray Hendricks mentioned you rescued someone from the creek." Marcus explained the previous day's events and Catherine Wells's subsequent job offer, carefully omitting details about Atlantic Aqua's regional development plans. "Elena, I'm trying to figure out if this opportunity is legitimate or if I'm walking into some kind of corporate trap." Elena was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts with the careful consideration she brought to all decisions involving her students' welfare. "Marcus, I've been watching Atlantic Aqua's activities in this region for the past 2 years. They've been quietly acquiring water rights and property options throughout the valley, always through local intermediaries that make it difficult to track their real intentions." Marcus felt his stomach tighten with concern. What kind of activities? Elena's voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent months researching a situation that worried her deeply. Property acquisitions that don't make sense from a residential or commercial development perspective. Water rights purchases that seem designed to control access rather than improve services. And most concerning, they've been hiring local people for what they call community outreach, positions that seem designed to gather information rather than provide genuine community benefits. Marcus thought about Catherine's casual knowledge of his family situation and her company's comprehensive research on local residents. "Elena, do you think accepting a job with Atlantic Aqua would put Sofia and me in danger?" "I don't know about danger, Marcus, but I do. I think it would put you in a position where your loyalty might be divided between your family's immediate needs and your community's long-term interests." Atlantic Aqua has a pattern of using local employees to legitimize business practices that might not serve local communities well. After ending the call with Elena, Marcus found himself more conflicted than ever about Catherine's offer. The financial security she was proposing could transform Sofia's educational opportunities and eliminate the constant stress of living paycheck to paycheck. But the cost might be participation in corporate activities that could harm the community where he'd built his life. The afternoon brought another complication when Marcus received a phone call from Carmen, Sofia's mother, who was calling from Phoenix with news that would further complicate his decision-making process. "Marcus, I need to talk to you about Sofia's future," Carmen said without preamble, her voice carrying the crisp efficiency she'd developed during her years in corporate marketing. "David and I have been discussing the possibility of Sofia coming to live with us in Phoenix." Marcus felt his world tilt sideways as he processed what Carmen was suggesting. "What are you talking about?" "Sofia lives with me. That's what we agreed on in the custody arrangement." Carmen's tone became more conciliatory but no less determined. "Marcus, I know you love Sofia and that you're doing your best to provide for her. But David has been promoted to regional manager at his company, and we're in a position to offer Sofia opportunities that you simply can't match on a construction worker's salary." Marcus pulled his truck off the road, needing to focus completely on a conversation that could determine his daughter's future. "What kind of opportunities?" "Private school enrollment at one of Phoenix's best academic institutions. Summer programs at Stanford and MIT for gifted students. Test preparation and college counseling that could help her earn full scholarships to Ivy League universities. David has connections in the tech industry that could provide internship opportunities during high school." Marcus listened to Carmen's list of advantages with growing desperation, understanding that everything she was offering represented the kind of educational opportunities that his current income could never provide. "Carmen, Sofia doesn't want to leave Cedar Falls. This is her home. Her friends are here." "Marcus, Sofia is 12 years old. She doesn't understand the long-term implications of staying in a town that can't offer her the kind of future her intelligence deserves. We're not talking about taking her away from you permanently. She could spend summers with you, and you could visit Phoenix whenever you want." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling trapped between impossible choices. If he refused Carmen's proposal, he might be denying Sofia educational opportunities that could shape her entire future. If he accepted Catherine Wells's job offer, he might be able to provide similar opportunities while keeping Sofia with him, but at the cost of potential complicity in corporate activities that could harm their community. "Carmen, I need time to think about this. Sofia and I need to discuss what she wants for her future." Carmen's voice softened with what sounded like genuine sympathy. "Marcus, I know this is difficult, but David and I have already enrolled Sofia in a summer academic program at Arizona State University that starts in June. We think experiencing the kind of educational opportunities available here might help her understand the advantages of living in Phoenix." Marcus felt anger surge through his chest at the implication that Carmen and David had made plans for Sofia without consulting him. You can't just decide Sofia's future without including her in the conversation. She's not a piece of property to be transferred based on who can offer the best financial package. "Of course not," Carmen said quickly. "But Marcus, you have to admit that your current situation isn't sustainable. How long can you continue working dangerous construction jobs that barely pay enough to cover basic expenses? What happens if you get injured or if the work dries up completely?" The questions hit Marcus like physical blows, because they reflected his own deepest fears about his ability to provide for Sofia's future. Construction work was inherently unstable, subject to weather conditions, economic fluctuations, and the physical limitations of aging. At 35, Marcus was already feeling the accumulated wear and tear of years spent performing manual labor, and he knew that his earning capacity would likely decline as he got older. After hanging up with Carmen, Marcus sat in his truck for a long time, watching the sun set behind the mountains that surrounded Cedar Falls. The beauty of the landscape that had always brought him comfort now seemed like a trap, keeping him in a place where economic opportunities were limited and his daughter's potential might never be fully realized. That evening's meeting with Catherine Wells took place in the Riverside Hotel's executive conference room, a space that seemed designed to impress visitors with its polished table, expensive artwork, and panoramic view of the valley where Atlantic Aqua apparently planned to implement their development projects. Catherine had changed from her rescue attire into a crisp business suit that conveyed authority and success. She was accompanied by two other Atlantic Aqua executives, a financial analyst named Robert Chen and a project development manager named Michelle Torres, both of whom carried themselves with the confident bearing of people accustomed to negotiating complex business arrangements. "Mr. Rivera," Catherine said as she gestured for Marcus to take a seat at the conference table. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us this evening. I hope you've had time to consider the opportunity we discussed yesterday. Marcus settled into his chair, feeling out of place in the corporate environment, but determined to understand exactly what Atlantic Aqua was proposing. I've been thinking about it, but I still have questions about what this job would actually involve, and what Atlantic Aqua is planning for Cedar Falls. Michelle Torres opened a presentation folder and spread several large maps across the conference table, each one showing different aspects of Atlantic Aqua's regional development plans. The maps were detailed and professional, clearly representing months or years of planning and geological analysis. Mr. Rivera, Michelle said, Atlantic Aqua has invested 18 months and approximately $4 million researching infrastructure development opportunities in this region. What we've discovered is a water management system that's decades out of date and completely inadequate for the challenges created by climate change. She pointed to various locations on the maps, indicating areas where flooding had repeatedly damaged roads, bridges, and residential properties. These red zones represent areas that have experienced significant flood damage over the past decade. The yellow zones are areas where current drainage systems are inadequate but haven't yet failed catastrophically. Robert Chen produced a tablet computer and began displaying financial projections with the efficiency of someone accustomed to presenting complex data to decision makers. Our economic analysis suggests that Cedar Falls and surrounding communities will spend approximately $60 million over the next 20 years repairing infrastructure damage caused by inadequate water management systems. Marcus studied the financial projections, impressed despite himself by the thoroughness of Atlantic Aqua's research. What's your alternative? Catherine leaned forward with the focused intensity of someone presenting her most important argument. Comprehensive modernization of the entire regional water management system. New flood control infrastructure that can handle extreme weather events. Modern water treatment facilities that will provide clean, affordable water for decades. Economic development projects that will create hundreds of permanent jobs and attract new businesses to the region. Michelle Torres indicated specific locations on the maps where Atlantic Aqua planned to construct various facilities. The centerpiece of our development plan is a state-of-the-art water treatment and flood control facility that would be built on approximately 200 acres of currently undeveloped land along Clearwater Creek. Marcus felt a chill of recognition as he realized they were describing the area where he'd rescued Catherine the previous day. You're talking about building this facility upstream from where your accident occurred? Catherine's smile was enigmatic as she nodded. The accident that brought us together happened to occur at exactly the location where Atlantic Aqua has been planning to construct our regional headquarters. Some might call that coincidence. I prefer to think of it as fate providing an opportunity for us to work together on something that will benefit everyone involved. Robert Chen displayed more financial data on his tablet, showing projected revenue streams and employment figures that seemed almost too good to be true. Atlantic Aqua's investment in regional infrastructure development would create approximately 400 permanent jobs and generate an estimated $15 million annually in local tax revenue. Marcus looked at the employment projections, thinking about the families in Cedar Falls who were struggling with the same economic challenges that affected his own household. 400 permanent jobs would transform the local economy and provide opportunities for young people who currently had to leave town to find decent employment. What would my role be in all of this? Marcus asked. Catherine's expression became more personal as she shifted from corporate presentation mode to direct conversation. Mr. Rivera, your role would be to serve as our primary liaison with the Cedar Falls community. You would help us understand local concerns and perspectives as we develop our projects. You would also help community members understand the benefits that Atlantic Aqua's investments will bring to the region. Michelle Torres produced a detailed job description that outlined Marcus's responsibilities and compensation package. The position would be full-time with a starting salary of $90,000 annually, plus health insurance, retirement benefits, and performance bonuses that could add another $20,000 to $30,000 per year. Marcus stared at the compensation figures, understanding that Atlantic Aqua was offering him more money than he'd ever imagined earning. $90,000 would not only cover his and Sofia's basic needs, but would also provide the educational opportunities that Carmen was promising in Phoenix. There's also an educational component to the compensation package, Robert Chen added. Atlantic Aqua provides college scholarships for the children of our employees. Full tuition coverage at any accredited university, plus additional support for advanced degrees and professional development. Marcus felt his heart racing as he processed what they were offering. Financial security for his family, educational opportunities for Sofia, the chance to be part of a development project that could revitalize his entire community. It seemed like the answer to every problem he'd been struggling with for years. "What's the timeline for this project?" Marcus asked. Catherine consulted her notes with practiced efficiency. "We're planning to begin construction within 6 months, pending completion of environmental impact assessments and acquisition of the remaining property rights we need for the development site." Michelle Torres highlighted specific parcels on the development maps, showing areas where Atlantic Aqua still needed to complete property acquisitions. "Most of the land we need is currently owned by individual families or small businesses. We're hoping that having a respected community member like you on our team will help facilitate productive conversations with property owners who might be reluctant to sell to a large corporation." Marcus felt a warning sensation in his stomach as he began to understand the real nature of his proposed role with Atlantic Aqua. "You want me to convince people to sell their property to your company?" Catherine's tone remained professional but became more direct. "We want you to help people understand the benefits of participating in a development project that will improve their community's economic future. Some property owners might initially be reluctant to sell because they don't understand the advantages that Atlantic Aqua's investment will bring to the region." Robert Chen displayed a list of properties that Atlantic Aqua needed to acquire, including farms, small businesses, and residential properties that had been in families for generations. "Our research indicates that many of these property owners are struggling financially and would benefit significantly from the purchase prices we're prepared to offer." Marcus studied the list, recognizing several names of people he'd known his entire life. The Kowalski family, who owned a small dairy farm that had been struggling since milk prices collapsed. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow whose property taxes had been increasing faster than her fixed income could accommodate. The Chen family, who operated a small restaurant that had been losing customers as young people left Cedar Falls for opportunities in larger cities. "How much are you offering these property owners?" Marcus asked. Michelle Torres produced another set of documents showing Atlantic Aqua's proposed purchase prices for each property. "Our offers are based on current market valuations, plus a 20% premium to compensate property owners for the inconvenience of relocation." Marcus examined the purchase offers, realizing that Atlantic Aqua was proposing to pay significantly more than most of these properties would bring on the open market. For families who were struggling financially, the offers would represent genuine opportunities to escape debt and start fresh somewhere else. "Mr. Rivera," Catherine said, "I understand that asking people to sell property that might have sentimental value is a sensitive responsibility. That's why we need someone like you, someone who understands this community and genuinely cares about its welfare, to help facilitate these conversations." Marcus thought about his conversation with Carmen and her threats to seek custody of Sofia if he couldn't provide adequate educational opportunities. The job Atlantic Aqua was offering would solve that problem and allow him to keep his daughter while ensuring her access to the best possible education. "I'd like to think about this overnight," Marcus said finally. "This is a big decision that will affect my family's future." Catherine nodded with understanding. "Of course, but Mr. Rivera, I should mention that we're hoping to finalize our community liaison position within the next week. Atlantic Aqua has other candidates for this role, but your heroic actions yesterday demonstrated the kind of character and community connection that we value highly." As Marcus prepared to leave the hotel, Robert Chen handed him a folder containing detailed information about Atlantic Aqua's development plans, financial projections, and employee benefits package. "Everything you need to make an informed decision about your future with our company." The drive home through Cedar Falls took Marcus past many of the properties that Atlantic Aqua wanted to acquire, each one representing families and businesses that had been part of the community's fabric for decades. He thought about the Kowalski dairy farm, where he'd worked summers during high school, learning the value of hard physical labor and the satisfaction of caring for animals. He thought about Mrs. Patterson's small house, where Sofia had learned to bake cookies and where 3 generations of Cedar Falls children had been welcomed with homemade treats and gentle wisdom. At home, Sofia was waiting with homework questions about a science project that required research she couldn't complete with their unreliable internet connection. Marcus helped her work through the assignment using his phone's data plan. thinking about the educational resources that Atlantic Aqua's salary and benefits package could provide. "Dad, you look stressed," Sofia observed as they finished her homework. "Did your meeting tonight go well?" Marcus sat down beside his daughter on their small couch, considering how much of the situation he should share with someone who was still only 12 years old. "The meeting went well, but the decision is complicated. The job they're offering could solve a lot of our financial problems and provide you with educational opportunities I can't afford on my current salary." Sofia's expression grew serious as she processed what her father was telling her. "But there's something about the job that worries you?" Marcus marveled again at his daughter's perceptive intelligence. "The company wants me to help convince local property owners to sell their land for a development project. Most of these people are our neighbors and friends. I'm not sure how I feel about being part of a process that might pressure them to give up property that's been in their families for generations." Sofia considered this information with the analytical approach she brought to difficult problems. "Dad, would the development project be good for Cedar Falls overall?" Marcus thought about Atlantic Aqua's financial projections and employment figures. According to their research, it would create hundreds of jobs and bring millions of dollars in tax revenue to the community. It would also modernize our water management systems and provide better flood protection. Sofia nodded thoughtfully. "So the project would help a lot of people, even if it requires some families to relocate?" "That's what the company claims," Marcus said. "But I'm not sure if their priorities align with what's actually best for our community, or if they're just focused on maximizing their own profits." Sofia was quiet for several minutes, working through the ethical complexities of the situation with impressive maturity. "Dad, maybe you could take the job but also make sure that the property owners understand all their options before they make decisions about selling. You could be their advocate as well as the company's representative." Marcus pulled Sofia into a hug, amazed by her ability to find balanced solutions to complicated problems. "That's exactly the kind of wisdom I needed to hear tonight." The next morning brought a phone call that would further complicate Marcus's decision-making process. Elena Martinez called to inform him that she'd been researching Atlantic Aqua's activities in other regions and had discovered information that concerned her deeply. "Marcus, I spent last night reading about Atlantic Aqua's development projects in Colorado and Montana. In both cases, they promised economic revitalization and job creation for struggling rural communities. In both cases, the long-term results were very different from what they initially promised." Marcus felt his stomach tighten with apprehension. "What happened?" Elena's voice carried the weight of someone delivering unwelcome news. "In Colorado, Atlantic Aqua built their water treatment facility and created the promised jobs, but they also gained control of the region's entire water supply. Within 3 years, water rates had increased by 400%, and several small businesses were forced to close because they couldn't afford the increased utility costs." Marcus thought about the detailed financial projections that Robert Chen had shown him the previous evening. What about the tax revenue and economic development they promised? The tax revenue materialized, but most of it went to service the municipal bonds that Atlantic Aqua convinced local governments to issue to fund infrastructure improvements. The communities ended up financially dependent on Atlantic Aqua's continued operation, with no leverage to negotiate fair utility rates. Elena paused before delivering what Marcus sensed was the most concerning information. "Marcus, in both Colorado and Montana, Atlantic Aqua hired respected community members to serve as liaisons during the development process. These people were genuinely trying to help their communities, but they ended up being used to legitimize business practices that ultimately harmed local residents." Marcus felt a chill of recognition as he understood the pattern Elena was describing. "You think that's what they're trying to do with me? I think Catherine Wells is offering you a job that sounds wonderful, because she needs someone with your reputation and community connections to help her acquire the properties Atlantic Aqua needs for their development project. Once they control the regional water supply, your usefulness to them will be finished, but the damage to your community relationships will be permanent." After hanging up with Elena, Marcus found himself more conflicted than ever about Catherine's offer. The financial benefits were real and significant, potentially solving every economic challenge his family faced. But the long-term consequences for Cedar Falls might be devastating, and his role in facilitating those consequences would permanently damage his relationships with neighbors and friends. Marcus spent the morning at the construction site, but found it difficult to focus on bridge repairs when his mind was racing with questions about Atlantic Aqua's true intentions and his family's future. Ray Hendricks noticed his distraction and pulled him aside during lunch break. Marcus, whatever decision you make about this corporate job offer, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Easy money that comes with hidden costs usually ends up being more expensive than the hard money you earn, honestly. Marcus appreciated Ray's concern, but he also thought about Carmen's ultimatum and Sofia's educational needs. Ray, what if this is the only chance I'll have to provide Sofia with the opportunities she deserves? What if turning down this job means watching her move to Phoenix because I can't afford to give her the education her intelligence deserves? Ray's expression was sympathetic but firm. Marcus, I've been in construction for 38 years, and I've seen a lot of good men make bad decisions because they were thinking about short-term solutions to long-term problems. Sometimes the right choice is the harder choice, even when it means sacrificing immediate benefits for long-term integrity. That afternoon, Marcus received another phone call from Catherine Wells, who was following up on their previous evening's meeting with additional information designed to address his concerns about Atlantic Aqua's development plans. Mr. Rivera, I understand that you might have questions about Atlantic Aqua's track record in other regions. I'd like to address those concerns directly and provide you with information that might not be available through public sources. Catherine's tone was more personal than it had been during their corporate meeting, suggesting that she was speaking as an individual rather than as a company representative. I've been with Atlantic Aqua for 12 years, and I've seen our company evolve from a small regional water management firm into a major player in infrastructure development. Not every project has been perfect, but we've learned from our mistakes and improved our community engagement processes. Marcus appreciated Catherine's directness, but he remained skeptical about her company's true intentions. Ms. Wells, I've heard about situations where Atlantic Aqua gained control of regional water supplies and then increased rates dramatically after local communities became dependent on your services. Catherine was quiet for a moment, before responding with what sounded like genuine thoughtfulness. Mr. Rivera, I won't lie to you about our company's past performance. There have been projects where our financial priorities took precedence over community welfare, and the results were unfortunate for local residents. She paused, and Marcus could hear background noise that suggested she was calling from a car or airport. But the Cedar Falls project represents a new approach for Atlantic Aqua. We're implementing community benefit agreements that will legally limit our ability to raise water rates beyond inflation-adjusted increases. We're also establishing local oversight committees that will include community representatives with veto power over major operational decisions. Marcus felt a flicker of hope that Atlantic Aqua might genuinely be committed to balancing profit with community welfare. What kind of community representatives? People like you, Mr. Rivera. Local residents who understand their community's needs and have the integrity to stand up for their neighbors' interests, even when that might conflict with corporate preferences. Catherine's voice became more urgent as she continued. Marcus, I'm going to be completely honest with you about something. Atlantic Aqua's board of directors has been pushing for more aggressive acquisition strategies that prioritize short-term profits over long-term community relationships. I've been fighting for a different approach, one that treats local communities as genuine partners rather than obstacles to be overcome. Marcus felt surprised by Catherine's apparent candor about internal corporate conflicts. Why are you telling me this? Because your decision about joining our team could determine which approach Atlantic Aqua takes in Cedar Falls. If I can demonstrate that community partnership strategies produce better long-term results than aggressive acquisition tactics, it will influence how our company operates in other regions as well. Catherine paused before making what sounded like a personal appeal. Marcus, you saved my life 2 days ago without knowing who I was or what I could offer you in return. That kind of character is exactly what Atlantic Aqua needs to become the kind of company that genuinely serves community interests, rather than just extracting profit from them. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, as he realized that his decision might affect not only his own family, but also other communities where Atlantic Aqua was planning development projects. Ms. Wells, if I took this job, what guarantees would I have that Atlantic Aqua would honor its commitments to community partnership? Legal guarantees in the form of binding community benefit agreements that would be enforceable in federal court. Financial guarantees in the form of escrow accounts that would fund community development projects regardless of Atlantic Aqua's future profitability. And personal guarantees from me that I will resign from Atlantic Aqua if the company violates its commitments to Cedar Falls. Marcus was impressed by the specificity of Catherine's proposals, but he remained cautious about trusting a corporation whose previous behavior had demonstrated questionable priorities. "I need more time to think about this, Ms. Wells. This decision will affect not only my family but also my entire community." Catherine's response was immediate and understanding. "Of course, Mr. Rivera. But I should let you know that Atlantic Aqua's board meeting is scheduled for next Monday. If we're going to implement community partnership strategies in Cedar Falls, I need to present a complete team structure that includes our community liaison position." After hanging up with Catherine, Marcus realized that he had less than a week to make a decision that could determine his family's future and potentially influence Atlantic Aqua's approach to community development across multiple regions. The pressure was enormous, but he also understood that the stakes involved much more than his personal financial situation. That evening, Marcus sat down with Sofia to discuss the complexity of the decision they were facing. He explained Catherine's latest proposals, Elena's research into Atlantic Aqua's track record, and Carmen's threats regarding custody arrangements. "Dad," Sofia said after listening carefully to all the information, "it sounds like this decision isn't just about our family anymore. It's about whether Atlantic Aqua will treat Cedar Falls fairly or whether they'll do the same things they've done in other places." Marcus nodded, impressed by his daughter's ability to understand the broader implications of the situation. "That's exactly right, Sofia. If I take this job, I might be able to help ensure that Atlantic Aqua keeps its promises to our community. But I might also be helping them acquire properties and water rights that they could use to exploit our neighbors." Sofia was quiet for several minutes, working through the ethical complexities with impressive maturity. "Dad, maybe the question isn't whether Atlantic Aqua is a good company or a bad company. Maybe the question is whether you can be a good person while working for them." Marcus felt a surge of pride in his daughter's wisdom and moral clarity. "What do you mean?" Sofia organized her thoughts with the methodical approach she brought to difficult problems. "If you take the job, you could use your position to protect our neighbors and make sure they understand all their options before they make decisions about selling their property. You could also hold Atlantic Aqua accountable for the promises they're making to our community." Marcus considered Sofia's perspective, realizing that she was suggesting a strategy of engagement rather than avoidance. "You think I should take the job and try to influence Atlantic Aqua from within?" Sofia nodded with conviction. "I think you should take the job and be the person who makes sure Atlantic Aqua does the right thing. Someone needs to represent our community's interests, and it might as well be someone who actually cares about what happens to our neighbors." Marcus pulled Sofia into a hug, marveling at the young woman she was becoming and grateful for her presence in his life. "When did you become so wise about complicated adult problems?" Sofia's smile was gentle but determined. "Probably around the time I realized that our family's decisions affect more people than just us. Dad, if this job can help you provide for our family while also protecting our community, then maybe it's not as complicated as it seems." That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about Sofia's advice and the responsibility he would be accepting if he chose to work with Atlantic Aqua. The financial benefits were undeniable, but the ethical challenges would be significant. However, Sofia was right that someone needed to represent Cedar Falls, interests in negotiations with a powerful corporation, and Marcus understood his community well enough to serve as an effective advocate. The next morning brought another complication when Marcus received a certified letter from Carmen's attorney, formally requesting a custody hearing to determine whether Sofia's best interests would be served by relocating to Phoenix. The legal document made it clear that Carmen was serious about challenging their current arrangement, and that Marcus would need substantial financial resources to fight for his daughter. Marcus called Elena Martinez to discuss the custody threat and its implications for his decision about Atlantic Aqua's job offer. Elena's response was immediate and supportive, but also realistic about the challenges Marcus faced. "Marcus, family court judges prioritize children's educational opportunities and financial stability when making custody decisions. If Carmen can demonstrate that Phoenix offers Sofia better schools and more resources, the court might rule in her favor unless you can provide comparable opportunities." Marcus felt the walls closing in around him as he realized that turning down Atlantic Aqua's job offer might result in losing custody of Sofia, while accepting it might make him complicit in corporate activities that could harm his community. "Elena, what would you do if you were in my situation?" Elena's response was thoughtful and honest. "I think I would take the job and use it as an opportunity to hold Atlantic Aqua accountable for their promises to Cedar Falls." You have more influence over this situation from inside their organization than you do as an outside critic. She paused before adding what Marcus sensed was her most important advice. Marcus, sometimes the best way to protect your community is to put yourself in a position where you can influence the decisions that affect everyone's future. This job might be your chance to ensure that Atlantic Aqua's development project benefits Cedar Falls rather than exploiting it. That afternoon, Marcus drove to the construction site where he'd first encountered Catherine Wells, parking beside Clearwater Creek and thinking about the chain of events that had brought him to this decision point. The creek was running peacefully now, giving no indication of the dangerous torrent it had become during the recent storm. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Catherine Wells, knowing that the conversation he was about to have would determine the direction of his family's future and potentially influence Atlantic Aqua's approach to community development. Ms. Wells, this is Marcus Rivera. I've made my decision about your job offer. Catherine's response was immediate and focused. Mr. Rivera, I'm glad you called. What have you decided? Marcus took a deep breath before committing to a course of action that would test his ability to balance family loyalty with community responsibility. I'll take the job, but only if Atlantic Aqua agrees to specific conditions that protect Cedar Falls residents and ensure genuine community partnership in all development decisions. Catherine's tone became more businesslike as she transitioned into negotiation mode. What kind of conditions? Marcus had spent the previous evening developing a list of requirements that would safeguard community interests while allowing Atlantic Aqua to proceed with their development project. Legal guarantees that water rates will not increase beyond inflation adjustments for the first 10 years of operation. Community oversight committees with veto power over major operational decisions. Fair market value compensation for all property acquisitions, plus relocation assistance for families who need to move. Catherine was quiet for several moments, apparently considering the financial and operational implications of Marcus's demands. Mr. Rivera, some of these conditions would require approval from Atlantic Aqua's Board of Directors and Legal Department. They're more comprehensive than our standard community benefit agreements. Marcus felt a surge of determination as he realized that this negotiation would set the precedent for Atlantic Aqua's relationship with Cedar Falls. Ms. Wells, these conditions are non-negotiable. If Atlantic Aqua isn't willing to commit to genuine community partnership, then I'm not interested in working for your company. Catherine's response surprised Marcus with its immediate agreement. Mr. Rivera, I think your conditions are reasonable and necessary. I'll present them to our board of directors at Monday's meeting, and I'm confident that I can secure approval for community benefit agreements that address all of your concerns. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension as he realized that Catherine's acceptance might indicate that Atlantic Aqua was genuinely committed to fair dealing with Cedar Falls, or that the company was simply willing to make promises they had no intention of keeping. Ms. Wells, I need these agreements in writing before I accept the position. Legal documents that are binding and enforceable, not just corporate policy statements that can be changed at will. Catherine's tone became more personal as she responded to Marcus's demand for legal protections. Marcus, I understand your caution, and I respect your determination to protect your community's interests. You'll have written guarantees before you make any final commitments to Atlantic Aqua. As Marcus hung up the phone, he felt like he'd just committed to walking a tightrope between competing loyalties and conflicting interests. The job would provide financial security for his family and potentially protect Cedar Falls from corporate exploitation, but it would also test his ability to maintain his integrity while working for a company whose priorities might not always align with community welfare. That evening, Marcus sat down with Sofia to explain his decision and the conditions he'd negotiated with Atlantic Aqua. His daughter listened carefully before offering her perspective on the path forward. Dad, I think you made the right choice. Now you'll be in a position to make sure Atlantic Aqua keeps its promises to our community. Marcus hoped that Sofia's confidence in his decision was justified, and that his new role with Atlantic Aqua would allow him to serve both his family's needs and his community's interests. The real test would come when those interests conflicted, and Marcus would have to choose between personal benefits and community welfare. The following Monday, Marcus began his new role as Atlantic Aqua's community liaison. Catherine Wells had kept her promises about community benefit agreements, establishing legal protections that limited water rate increases and guaranteed local hiring preferences. Marcus's first challenge came when Dr. Sarah Kim, a university hydrologist, discovered that Atlantic Aqua's facilities in other states had caused groundwater contamination, Marcus confronted Catherine directly about environmental safeguards for Cedar Falls. The Cedar Falls project uses completely upgraded technology, Catherine assured him, showing detailed environmental protection systems. Plus, my family is relocating here. I have the same stake in this community's safety as everyone else. Marcus spent months facilitating property acquisitions, helping neighbors like Stanley Kowalski understand that Atlantic Aqua's generous offers could solve their financial struggles while funding community development. The process was transparent and fair, with no forced sales required. When Carmen threatened a custody battle over Sofia's education, Marcus's new salary and benefits package provided the financial stability to fight for his daughter and win. The judge ruled that Marcus could now provide educational opportunities comparable to what Phoenix offered. A chemical spill at the construction site tested Atlantic Aqua's accountability. Catherine immediately implemented cleanup procedures, held public meetings, and strengthened environmental safeguards. Her transparent response proved the company's commitment to community welfare. 2 years later, Cedar Falls thrived with new jobs, improved infrastructure, and protected water rates. Marcus had been promoted to regional community liaison, helping other towns establish similar partnerships. Standing by Clearwater Creek with Sofia, Marcus reflected on how rescuing Catherine had changed everything. But the real reward wasn't the career advancement or financial security. It was discovering that individual integrity could create positive change for an entire community, proving that doing the right thing ultimately benefits everyone. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.